This is the Leadership Lens, where we say the hard truths and fix the system. Today we're talking about the most well-intended, most overscheduled, and most consistently underperforming tool in K-12 education, the professional learning community, or, as I've seen in many of the buildings I've worked in, the professional compliance ceremony. I say that not to be dismissive, but because the PLC deserves better than what most schools have turned it into. Dufour's research is unambiguous. When teachers collaborate around the right questions, specifically what students have learned and what we're going to do about what they have not, student outcomes improve measurably and consistently in well-documented cases within a single semester. That's how powerful this tool can be when it's actually functioning. The problem isn't that PLCs don't work. The problem is that most schools are not running PLCs. They're running meetings with the PLC name tag, and there's a significant difference between the two. Today we're going to name that difference precisely and give you the system to close it. I'm going to describe something, and I want you to tell me if you recognize it. The PLC meeting starts at 2:15. Teachers arrive with their laptops. Someone pulls up the protocol template because the district requires it to be completed. There are announcements, a reminder about the upcoming benchmark window, a note about the field trip permission slip deadline. Then there's a curriculum pacing check. Someone shares what they're doing in their classroom and others nod. There's a parking lot for ideas that nobody will revisit, and at 3:05, the meeting ends, the template gets filed, and everyone returns to their classrooms to plan for tomorrow as they did yesterday. That's a meeting, not a PLC. And let's be brutally honest, your teachers know the difference, even if they cannot articulate it. They can feel the gap between a meeting that respects their time and expertise and a meeting that treats them like compliance boxes to be checked. And over time, that gap produces exactly the kind of disengagement we talked about in the previous episode. The committee exit, the architecture of apathy. Your best teachers quietly stop investing in a structure that is not investing in them. They can feel the gap between a meeting that respects their time and expertise and a meeting that treats them like compliance boxes to be checked. And over time, that gap produces exactly the kind of disengagement we talked about in the previous episode. The committee exit, the architecture of apathy. Your best teachers stop investing in a structure that is not investing in them. What makes a real PLC different isn't the structure of the meeting or the protocol on the template. It's the anchor question. Richard Dufour spent decades studying the separation of professional learning communities that shift teacher practice from those that generate discussion without decisions. His findings were not complicated. Teams that focus their collaboration around a specific student-centered question, what did our students learn and what will we do about it, produce measurable instructional change. Teams that do not. The anchor question is the variable. Everything else is the furniture. So how do you know honestly whether your PLCs are functioning as a data engine or as a compliance ritual? Here's the diagnostic I use. 4 questions. If your PLC fails 2 or more of them, you're running a meeting. Question 1. Is there an anchor question tied to student learning data? Not a theme for the semester, not a broad goal, one specific question that every teacher in the room is answering together using actual evidence of what students produced this week. If the answer is no, you're having a conversation, not a PLC. Question 2, are teachers analyzing actual student work, not talking about students? There's a critical difference between a room full of teachers saying their students are struggling with inferencing and a room full of teachers holding students writing samples, identifying the specific place where the thinking breaks down. One is a discussion, the other is a diagnosis. If nobody has brought student work to the table, you have not started the real work yet. Question 3. Does every teacher leave with a specific instructional adjustment? One thing they'll do differently before the next meeting. Not a vague commitment to try more rigor, a specific move. If you administer a task requiring students to analyze cause and effect and every script shows students summarizing, the adjustment is explicit. Tomorrow, we model analysis before we ask for it. That's a decision. That's what a PLC produces. Question 4. Is there an accountability structure checking whether the adjustment actually happened? This is the one that most systems skip entirely. You can have a brilliant PLC conversation with clear instructional decisions and see zero change in classroom if there's not a mechanism in place to check if the decision was implemented or not. The feedback loop has to close, not surveil teachers, but to learn together whether the adjustment worked. 4 questions. That's the diagnosis, and here is how you fix it when the answers reveal a meeting instead of a PLC. I call it the compression protocol. The compression protocol takes the average 50-minute PLC and compresses it into 4 non-negotiable segments. 5 minutes for the anchor question. You arrive with a preconceived decision on what specific learning data the team will examine, and spend the first 5 minutes making sure everyone understands the focus. 20 minutes for student work analysis. The team examines produced work against the standards demand. No side conversations, no announcements, no pacing updates, just evidence and the gap it reveals. These 20 minutes are for instructional decision making. What specific adjustment will every teacher make before you meet again? Write it down. Name the teacher who will try it first. Set the expectation that the group will hear what happened. And 5 minutes for accountability commitments. Who's doing what, by when, and how will we know? That's it. The compression protocol. The reason this works isn't because of the structure, it's the discipline. The compression protocol eliminates the space that compliance calendars occupy. When the anchor question is set before the meeting begins, there is no room for announcements or pacing discussions to consume the time. When student work analysis has 20 minutes and a hard stop, the conversation stays in the evidence. When every teacher leaves with a specific move, the meeting was worth the 50 minutes it cost. When the accountability commitment is documented, the loop closes. Let me put this through the lens of functional tiering, because where you sit in the system determines how you govern this. At the teacher's microscopic level, the PLC is the place where individual classroom practice gets examined and adjusted based on what students actually produce. The teacher brings their data, their student work, their honest assessment of what is working and what is not. The microscope is honest and specific. When a teacher walks into a PLC with 3 student work samples showing the same gap, they're not asking for sympathy, they're asking for a better move. At the principal's X-ray level, the PLC should be visible as an instructional pressure point. If you cannot draw a direct line between what your teachers discussed in last Tuesday's PLC and what changed in classrooms by Thursday, your PLC is not functioning as a system, it's functioning as a scheduled obligation. The X-ray question is, did the PLC produce an instructional decision that changed what a teacher did the next day? At the district satellite level, PLC health should be a visible leading indicator of instructional coherence. When every building in a district is anchoring its PLCs in the same types of questions rooted in the interaction between the teacher, the student, and the content, you're beginning to build something that looks like a coherent instructional system. When every building is running its own compliance ceremony, you have individual schools doing the best they can in isolation. The PLC is the structure that turns individual classroom data into a collective instructional decision. When it works, it's the most powerful professional development tool available to teachers, not because of what it teaches, but because of what it produces. Decisions that change what happens at the student's desk. If this is something you're navigating right now, and I suspect it is, given that most leaders have a PLC on the calendar this week or next, we have a micro move for you, which are small intentional shifts designed to help you reclaim your leadership so you can build a system that holds. Your micro move is to run the PLC Compression Protocol. Before your next PLC, do one thing that most leaders skip. Write the anchor question in advance and share it with your teachers before the meeting begins, not at 2:15 when everyone sits down. The anchor question should be specific enough that teachers arrive with student work already in hand, already having thought about what the evidence shows. Here's how this works. The anchor question must be tied to something students actually did, not something teachers planned. A strong anchor question sounds something like this. Looking at the extended response work from Friday's lesson, which students demonstrated analysis of the text and what was different about their instruction this week? Or, our benchmark showed 40% of students below standard on comparing and contrasting. What does that look like in the actual student work, and what is the one move each of us will make before Thursday? Those questions anchor the conversation to the evidence that is already in the room. Then, run the 4 segments with discipline. 5 minutes on the question, 20 minutes on the work, 20 on the decision, 5 on the commitment. Use a timer if you have to. The discomfort of the timer is the point. It signals that the conversation is purposeful, not open-ended. Here's the pivot that separates a good PLC from a system. When you come back to the next meeting, the first 5 minutes belong to the accountability commitment from last time. What did you try? What happened? What did students produce? That accountability structure is what converts a meeting into a learning cycle. Without it, the compression protocol is a better meeting. With it, it's a system. The compression protocol works best when teachers arrive having already done their own individual diagnostic work, when every person at the table comes not just with data, but with a hypothesis about what caused the gap. Individual participation before collective decision making. That's a deeper conversation, and it's one we will build towards. Leader to leader. Your teachers did not go into education to fill out protocols. They went into education to get better at helping students learn. The PLC, when it functions the way Dufour designed it, gives them that structure to do exactly that, together with evidence, accountability, and a specific move to try before they go back to their rooms. The compliance ceremony, it's not your fault. It's what happens when a powerful tool gets bureaucratized over time. The template becomes the product instead of the decision, and the meeting becomes the deliverable instead of the instructional change. While it isn't your fault, it's in your hands to reclaim it. Not with the new program, platform, or new district mandate, with one anchor question, written before the meeting starts, tied to work that students actually produced. That's the move. That's where it begins. To help you run your first evidence-based PLC this week, we're sharing a copy of our PLC Compression Protocol template. It's a single-page facilitation guide that walks your team through all 4 segments with timing, the questions, and the accountability structure built in. It's linked in the description below. Print it, use it this week, and see what a real PLC feels like. It's micro move time. This is the Leadership Lens. I'm Longino. Let's learn and grow together.